So the last time we got off into the novel, we were right at the point where Emiya was about to fight Cu. We're gonna be going through the rest of the day, so that's where we at. When we left off, Rin was investigating the bounded field that was around their school. She explains that she can't completely get rid of the bounded field herself, but she can get rid of some of the energy that's deploying the bounded field for a certain amount of time. So in the meantime, you have her draining these marks. She's on the final one, that being the 7th, and she shows us that she's actually been doing this with her magic crest. For a barrier of this level, she had to use her magic crest to get the information to dispel it. It was just that powerful. She says that it's more like a book. Whenever she needs to read it for a spell, she can just force her magical energy into the crest and it will give that information right to her. Right when she's about to cast the final one, she starts to hear an unfamiliar voice in the background that's not supposed to be there. So you telling me that you're really gonna waste your time with this? This of course being Lancer, aka Cu Chulainn. She couldn't help but ask if he's the one that made the barrier, and he tells her that's not my job. Being a part of the night class, I fight on demand like him. And when he says him, he's talking about Emiya. Even though Emiya was in spiritual form at the time, Rin is shocked to realize that Cu can still see him. So this is really one of our first exposures of the extent of a servant's awareness. That being able to sense a servant's spiritual pressure, if they're able of course, or if the servant isn't hiding it when they're using things like presence concealment. You can still be in spirit form and they can see right through this. I remember a scene in particular with Semiramis and Achilles when Semiramis was listening in on the conversation with Cheryl Kotamine prepping for an attack, and Achilles knew that she was there the entire time. Then he begins to spawn his spirit. Realizing that he is a servant, Rin is shook. I don't know who this man is, but something is telling me that fighting him would not be a good time. She's on the rooftop, she has nowhere to go. Cu goes in for the first swing, and surprisingly, she dodges it. The story even points out the fact that she used no magical energy when she did this. She dodged this with pure reflexes. Cu himself had to compliment her for this, saying, "Wow, you got some really nice legs." So she's been told. See, even Cu knows what's up. So there's a lot going on right now. She's about 2 steps away from being one-shotted, but what the scene really shows us is how quick Rin is on her feet. When she dodges the first attack, she starts to make her way towards the edge of the roof to jump the fence. Now, I brought this part up before. It seemed like a lot of people really didn't know about this, or they were at least surprised when I referenced it. When you first see the scene, it gives off the idea that Rin is just putting magical energy into herself to reinforce her legs, which she was. This was a quick way for her to gain distance between the two of them. But another thing that was happening is that right before she jumped, she read a spell that was in her magic crest that allowed for the manipulation of her body's weight. She shifted this to make her entire body as light as a feather, and then she jumped off. Originally, she was going to land on foot, but as she's falling, she's realizing that this might not be a good idea. He might be able to catch me midair. So she calls out to Archer to catch the landing instead. It also really goes to show how smart she is in these scenarios because she's constantly reevaluating the situation. Most people would have just jumped off the roof and that would have been the end of it. But as she's falling, she's literally calculating the distance, the time that it would take for her to reach the ground. Then there's the fact that it shows how superior she is as a magus as opposed to her actions in the real world. This is the first time that we really get to see her in action. In the last video, you had Emiya being pretty skeptical about how she dealt with preparation. You know, she's young, she's still learning, she's figuring things out. So as a seasoned warrior, her mindset is naturally not gonna be on par with his way of thinking. But in the heat of battle, in the very moment that the situation happens, her awareness is far superior to that of her planning. And her planning is good too, but her awareness is just way better. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that she used to train under Kirei. You know, she is a martial artist. That's a huge thing for her family line. To separate themselves from the other mages, they would learn martial arts to give them the physical advantage. Fighting itself takes some of the highest level of critical thinking there is. So the very nature of her practicing with Kirei made her stronger as a Magus too. Between the reflexes of her dodging Ku's first hit and her pulling off the fall. As I mentioned in the Don't Sleeps, you have the part where it tells us that she reached the ground in less than 7 seconds. Ku was right behind her, so he got there that fast with no help. You have Emiya dropping Rin off, and then he turns around to face Ku. Here we get our very first projection of the sword Kansho. Now mind you, this is before Artoria got summoned, so Ku's looking at Emiya's layout and he's just assuming him to be a saber. But the more that he starts to think about it, he just has some strange feeling about him. Then Ku decided through his deduction alone that Emiya can't be a person that likes to fight close range combat. He has to be an archer. Rin's in the background telling Emiya that she's not going to help him. Kinda ironic, but okay. She tells him that he's gotta show his worth. He laughs about it and immediately disappears and starts to rush Ku out of nowhere. He's pushing the issue and he's real life parrying this giant spear with just his short sword. This is something that's already interesting on Ku's behalf because by the book, it tells us that Emiya is the one that has the advantage here. Although Ku's spear comes out to be 2 meters long, it says that there really should be no way for him to get in on Archer because the overall size of his weapon is just a heavier burden. It's more designed for him to be on defense. But as she's watching the fight, Rin starts to realize that this is not the case at all. Ku's pressing against Emiya almost as if he's wielding a sword too. He was actually offended that Emiya decided to opt for something inferior to his bow, which as an archer should come out to be his best option. So he's attacking Emiya constantly, everywhere. The throat, the shoulders, the forehead, the heart, he's not letting up. The main priority for his spear would come out as a slash attack because unlike a sword, it gives you no room to escape when you come out on a failed assault. This is when Emiya opted for jumping over his attack instead of blocking because he knew this to be the case. Considering that Emiya is an archer, Rin points out that it's also difficult for him to get in on Ku because he lacks the armor to do so. He's not supposed to be up close anyway. But something else Rin starts to notice, Rin believes that Ku was underestimating Emiya, and once he wears him down, he's obviously going to lose. As soon as she says this, Ku starts to ramp up the speed of his spear thrusts. The same ones Emiya had been blocking up to this point in time were starting to overwhelm him, and with more speed came more power. Scratch that. We're the ones that underestimated him. Seeing how bad that is starting to get, Emiya tries to create space between the two, and Ku just uses this space to apply even more force behind the attack. Rin's telling herself that she has to find a way to help him, but there's no way for her to get proper aim when they're going at this speed. At the rate that they're moving, even if she does decide to help, she's liable to hit Emiya too, which would make it even worse for him. At that point, Emiya tries to block him with his Kansho and gets the weapon knocked out of his hand and destroyed. Now Emiya has no weapon at all. And right in that moment, he brings out a new blade, a second one, along with bringing out the first again, projected. Ku still doesn't let up. He continues to match this by throwing out a barrage of spear thrusts, forcing Emiya to do nothing but guard. He's not letting him breathe, let alone respond. The story tells us by this time that Ku has thrown over 100 blows and Emiya lost the sword each and every time. And in that next moment, he just brings the sword right back again. Ku starts to realize that he also was mistaken, that he could possibly lose by undermining Emiya's blade skills. So he disengages to recollect his thoughts. Then he starts yelling at Emiya, saying that he's disarmed him 27 times, but he keeps bringing out more. What's the deal with this? The idea here being there's so many that he can't keep count. The very nature of Emiya's projections is something really irregular. Usually a servant would just stick with one weapon, so him bringing out multiple is throwing Ku off. It then goes into the fact that the proof of a servant is their noble phantasm, the attack or defense that they use as their last resort. These are necessary for the person to create the destructive power from their legends. So by that same logic, there's no way that they could be disposable. And through that observation alone, there's no way that these swords could be his actual phantasm. Now you got Emiya taunting Ku. What's the matter, big fella? Where's all that energy you had, brother? You look tired. And to that, Ku replies calling him a cheater. Crazy that the guy that was just saying that he was using inferior resources resources is now calling him a cheater. But whatever you gotta tell yourself. Now Ku is curious. So who exactly are you? Naturally, Emiya doesn't tell him, but he says, I can tell who you are. That only the fastest servants get chosen for the Lancer class. I want to stop that statement right there. You know, as soon as he said that, I just had to go back and look at the Lancer class myself. And I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of valid. You got Karna, Skyhawk, Fion, Lartoria, Brandon, Aresh, Melusine, Percival, Canis. You could make it an issue if you just forced it, but surprisingly that statement holds up. Then Emiya points out there's only one that has beast-like speed on this level. Now before we get into it, listen guys, this is pre-Achilles, he lacks critical information, so we'll just let that slide. Ku starts to step back and he has his spear tilted towards the ground. I'm glad you understand. And then the air starts to freeze. Literally, Ku charging up his phantasm starts to freeze the magical energy in the air that's around them. Rin starts to realize that this spear is demonic. Emiya is gonna lose if he manages to get that off. And she's also saying that she still can't help. This is actually hilarious to me, because the whole time she's just been standing there saying how she can't do anything. It's very reminiscent to Shiro. Could this be the origins of the useless goddess? Hey man, when you can't do it, you can't do it. And right when Rin says if anything could beat him right now, her words get cut off. We come to find that Shiro has been watching the fight from a distance. Lancer stops charging the phantasm and goes to hunt down Shiro immediately. Emiya also admits to the fact that Shiro's intervention is what really saved their lives. That's an interesting statement considering what went down in the second fight. It's almost like Ku got nerfed on top of him already being nerfed by Kirei, because the second time they fought, he used the second version of Gaebulb, which focuses more so on power instead of the actual ability, and it goes in one straight direction. But his first version of Gaebulb is omnidirectional, and Ro Ayas only covers what's in front of you. So technically, Gaebulb could come from the side, it could come from above, it could come from behind, and there would be no way for him to stop it. Funny that Ku didn't get to use that, because that would have ended bad for him. So Rin asks Emiya, why are you just standing there? I kinda just got out a whole fight here, kinda exhausted. Go catch him. Nice. She starts to beat herself up over why all of this is happening in the first place. In the Magi world, you have to eliminate the witnesses. They catch back up to Shiro and they find him passed out on the floor. Ku has already caught him. He reeks of blood. Rin just assumes that he's already dead. She tells Archer to keep on following Ku, she'll deal with Shiro. And the reason why is that he's more than likely gonna go back to his master. So for all their trouble, at the very least they can find out who that is. She can't even really bring herself to look at Shiro's body, constantly telling herself it's my fault. For all the time, all the years that she spent mentally preparing herself for these type of situations, she still isn't, and she's extremely emotional. Then she realizes that his heart was pierced by Ku's spear, but somehow he's still alive. Protagonist power, baby. We survive everything. So she finally convinces herself to look at his face, saying that she owes him at least that much. Her fingers are shaking. She starts to lift up the head and then realized that it was Shiro, and her heart dropped into her stomach, asking why. Why did it have to be him out of all people? She started to think about Sakura and how she'd take the news. She started to think about the times that she watched him outside the school and how he was pushing himself when nobody else was there to give him support. In that moment, she decided to give up her father's catalyst, the pendant. Years and years worth of magical energy just to restore Shiro back to proper health. An extremely thoughtful response on her behalf, because not only was this one of her trump cards considering the magical energy, but by wasting this so early, this might have sealed the fate of her own life. So she does this, and before he even gets to wake up, she decides to head back home. On the way there, she realized that she left the pendant by accident, but she says it's fine. There might be something in it, but it's not really gonna be enough for it to make a difference anyway. She gets back to the crib and then she starts to reflect on their circumstances. She mentions that in the time she was freaking out about Ku using his phantasm, but if he would have done it, they would have found out his true identity. Yeah. And you also would have found death. might have been a good thing. Then she goes into the biggest weak point of a servant is discovering their true name. If a person has any leads, this could reveal what they're capable of and give you an advantage by default. The only person that should know the true name is the master. She also brings up the fact that a war can go any which way. The servants that have better armaments are usually the ones that are stronger, but they're harder to come by because it's hard to get a connection to these type of servants. You would need a relic that's associated with their lives, and that's not easy to get a hold of. It tells us that even the most powerful spirit can still have a hard time if they end up in the wrong class. The special abilities that come with the class allow you to overturn the situation and make it more favorable, i.e., beating a strong spirit regardless of their background. The knight classes, for example, saber, archer, and lancer, they all have strong magical resistance. Using casual spells against them is practically useless, and the reason being is that conceptually the saber class itself was definitive in the Age of Gods. This is one of the reasons that they've gained this power, and to make it even worse, a modern mage would probably just get their shots evaporated. She also gets into the berserker class, how this class makes you lose your sanity in exchange for parameter boosts, but this is a gift and a curse at the same time because the stronger the servant is, the worse it is on their master. Realistically, everybody just isn't fit to have a strong servant. Many people in the past tried to summon a berserker and they ended up bodying themselves just because they ran out of magical energy. So it's getting close to midnight and Emiya finally shows back up. Turns out he came up with nothing. Can't find anything about him. Then Ren brings up the fact that technically you're not supposed to be fighting until you get the green light anyway. That's one of the rules for the war, so it's not that big of a deal. So we really could let this slide. This has Archer curious. Considering how serious and by the book Ren is, he can't help but wonder what is her wish exactly from doing all of this. She claims that she doesn't have one. You gotta be joking. Why don't you wish for something classic, like ruling the world? And Ren tells him that the world is already hers. If the world is just the things that you value that's around you, then she's had all of that since she was born. Ruling the world would just be annoying anyway. So now Emiya's like, the hell you got me out here fighting for if you don't got a wish? And she tells him that the world is infinite. She'll just figure out what she wants along the way. Yes, what I'm telling you is that I'm fighting to win. My family has wanted the Grail for generations, but this is what I want. Of course, Emiya is disappointed. Not because of her response, but because this line of thinking makes her truly compatible as a master. But he does compliment her and tells her that she's the strongest master. And this really catches her off guard because usually Archer is trolling. She's embarrassed, but she can't help but be happy that they're at least on the same page. Then he pulls out the pendant that she left behind in school, saying that she's surprised that he got it, but he tells her that it only looks right if she has it. She also believes that she should keep it at least for her father's sake. Then she froze and remembered something out of nowhere. Shiro surviving will probably end up being an issue. If Ku happens to figure out that he made it out alive, he'll go back to hunt him down again and get him anyway. So it hits midnight and Ren is rushing out into the city heading straight for Shiro's house. Archer believes that at this point, it's really none of their business. Not only did Archer not want to help him back then, but he doesn't want to help this guy out now, which is kind of strange, but she keeps on going. Few things get changed around here. You have Ren running in like she's not giving it much thought, which wasn't really the case. She was actually very careful when she got there, noticing the same frozen air that Ku put out before. Good judgment on her part. And she vows that she's willing to protect Shiro from Ku. She'll just have to worry about what happens next. Yet another showcase of Ren's moral obligation and her just trying to be a decent person altogether. I brought this up before. We've seen this a ton of times in the bad ends. Ren has no problem sacrificing herself for Shiro. She's already given up her most cherished gem for this dude who she doesn't even really know at the time, and this was the same gem that was given to her by her father who she loves more than anything. Right when she's about to send Emiya inside, she feels Ku's power being swallowed up by something else. And then she sees Ku starts to hop over the wall and he's running away. That can be good. Soon after, she sees another servant hop over the wall, and she immediately starts to attack them both. For some reason, Rin froze up, which led to Emiya pushing her out of the way and taking the attack for her, in classic Emiya fashion. Multiple scenarios that can turn out here, but this is when Shiro uses his first command spell to stop Saber, and it starts up the UB dub route. And that'll be the end of that version of the prologue.